So, is the mystique of the volcanic soil and the misty, cloudy afternoons in Kona incredibly important? Not at all. Actually, volcanic soil is not that great because it's great for drainage, but it doesn't have a lot of nutrition. So it's actually in some ways harder to grow coffee on volcanic soil.
There are only a few states in the United States of America where coffee actually grows, and really only one state where there's any meaningful production. And that state is the beautiful island chain of Hawaii. Hawaii has a rich history of coffee production, and it's one of the most exotic and unique origins that you can find on grocery store shelves today. And there's also a lot to learn from Hawaii's culture when it comes to coffee production, when it comes to caring for the land, and when it comes to supporting coffee farmers who are doing the good work. With me today is an expert on Hawaiian coffee. Dr. Shawn Steiman holds MS and PhD degrees from the University of Hawaii in tropical plant and soil sciences. He's an educator and an author and a speaker over 20 years when it comes to educating on coffee. Welcome to the show, Shawn. Thank you for coming back.
Thanks for having me again. What a treat.
Oh man, we love having you on the show. So you are truly a Hawaiian coffee expert. We couldn't have thought of a better guest for this subject. So why don't we start from the top? Can you give us a little bit of a history on yourself and your relationship with Hawaiian coffee specifically? What makes that origin and that field of work so near and dear to your heart?
I would love to say that the origin of that answer was wholesome and meaningful about the coffee industry here. But really what happened is that when I finished my undergraduate degree in Ohio, I moved here straight away to get my master's degree to study coffee. So I did move here to study coffee. Um, and I loved it so much, I just kept studying it. And then when I finished all the studying I could do because there's no more degrees to get and life had to start, I decided to stay here until I had a good reason not to be here. And here I am, still here because this has been where all the reasons to be are.
The good reasons never came. You just stayed. Listen, if you're going to go study coffee somewhere, you lucked out.
I lucked out for sure. But in the process, integrated myself and fallen in love with this industry because it's a small industry. So it's easy to explore all the aspects of it and to integrate into all those aspects and to learn about them and meet people and do things. And so what's amazing about our industry, and when we talk about coffee industries, most people talk about the farming industry. We have a lot of farmers. We don't have an exact number, but it's probably some 1,000 farmers growing coffee in Hawaii of different sizes and complexities of their farms. But we really are an industry much broader than that because we're in the United States. We have roasteries and cafes and processors and middlemen and grocery stores and consumers. We have the whole gamut. We're not just growers. And so this industry is in many ways different than most others because of how these things all exist in this very small place together and have to integrate and interact and get along, hopefully.
Yeah, truly a unique origin, if only by the sake of the fact that it's a United State. Definitely makes it a very unique and interesting place. When most people talk about Hawaiian coffee, though, they think Kona, Kona, Kona coffee. And that's not all Hawaiian coffee. Can you just shed light on the difference between Hawaiian coffee and Kona coffee, what that means exactly?
Yeah, and then I'll tell you why Kona is thought of that way, or why I think thought of that way. So Hawaii is a state in the United States, and within this state, we have many islands. Within those islands, just like anywhere else in the country, we have counties. So on the biggest island of our chain, Hawaii Island, there are 4 counties: Hamakua, Hilo, Kau, and Kona. Any coffee plant that's grown in the political district of Kona is Kona coffee. It has nothing to do with the plant or the farmers. It's just an arbitrary distinction based on human creation.
So it's kind of like champagne is grown in Champagne, fair? But you're saying they're not all growing the same varieties, the same cultivars. They're growing all sorts of different stuff in all sorts of different ways. They're just in the same place on the island.
Correct. Now, if you go back 50 years, it was all the same variety, doing it all pretty much the same way, all homogenized and blended together by some big processors that then get shipped out. So there was a time when Kona was just pretty much this one thing. When all Kona coffee is roasted a certain way, kind of tasted the same. But that was a long time ago. The industry is very different now. And now we have coffee grown again in many different counties,
Uh-huh.
political counties and regions that now make Hawaiian coffee a much broader category.
So why does Kona get all the play then?
Great question. So coffee's been in Hawaii about 200 years. And for the first 100 or so years, roughly, less than that, it was grown all over the state in large quantities.
Mhm.
And for a variety of reasons, sugarcane and pineapple sort of took over a lot of that coffee land. This all happened around 1900.
No.
The one place in Hawaii that didn't stop growing coffee was Kona.
Oh.
So from roughly 1900 to roughly 2000, Kona was the only place in Hawaii commercially growing coffee. And so it became synonymous with Hawaiian coffee because it was the only one. And during that period, Hawaii also changed its essence and the consciousness of the American people and global people, right? We became this romantic tropical destination with hula dancers and lei and tropical beaches and all those things that made this a tourist destination. So sort of tied in with that, cultural idea was also these products, macadamia nuts and coffee, for example, right? That pineapples, right? That became tied into this notion. So Kona had this, wave it was riding
Yeah.
of reputation. Um, and then when sugarcane and pineapple, you know, ceased to become profitable for those companies and they started closing those operations down, a lot of those companies experimented with many crops to see how they could use their land, and coffee was one of them. Coffee's really the only one that survived that experimentation.
Mm.
And after those big companies started doing that, um, we also started seeing an influx of retirees or semi-retirees who thought, "Hey, I can, take my money in my older age and have a coffee farm in Hawaii. I don't have to go to California and grow grapes and produce wine. I can grow coffee." And so these people started first in Kona and then going to different islands to start making these small backyard farming operations. And some have become more than backyard operations, and some are quite significant, in addition to what was already here. So from the late 1990s to today, we have this huge diversity of farmers and where coffee is being grown and how it's being done and what people are growing. It's really just a very complex little production system. And when I say little, I really mean little, right? In the world of amount of coffee grown on the planet, Hawaii is a rounding error. It's something like 0.008% of world production.
Right. Doesn't that kind of make it special though, in a weird way?
Well, yes, rarity we associate as being special, but is that an important enough reason for anything to be special? Maybe. I'm a lover. I'm deeply committed to this industry. I'm also deeply committed to rational thinking.
Yeah.
I want people to love Hawaii and its coffee because of what it is, not because of some artificial romance, right? Rarity is an artificial romance to
That's
me.
really well said. And so I want to dig into some of that because it sounds like, with this kind of resurgence over the past couple of decades of different Hawaiian coffee farmers, and people growing all different varieties, even in the same region. What does make Hawaiian coffee then? Is there some sort of terroir aspect that's being lent from the volcanic soil, or is it more complicated than just that?
Well, I'm not an advocate that land is that important in terms of how it produces coffee flavors.
Yeah.
You can go to Kona today and, depending on the elevation of where the coffee's grown, or more appropriately, the temperature it's grown at, or what variety is being grown, or how the farmer's processing it, or how well it's been stored, or all the things that make coffee, right? The environment is just one piece of that puzzle.
Mhm.
So is the mystique of the volcanic soil and the misty, cloudy afternoons in Kona incredibly important? Not at all. Actually, volcanic soil is not that great because it's great for drainage, but it doesn't have a lot of nutrition. So it's actually in some ways harder to grow coffee on volcanic soil because you have to
Sure.
really create soil and add nutrients that you may not have to as much in other places. So there's a lot of romance. So what does make Hawaii coffee special?
Yeah.
Inherently, if we're just talking about the seed of a plant that gets roasted and consumed, nothing. I hate to say that because I've written a book about Hawaiian coffee and I've lived here for 26 years and I promote Hawaiian coffee and I sell Hawaiian coffee and I only buy from local roasters. Like it's very important to me. But inherently, it's just a plant that we grow here. So what makes it special is who's doing it under what conditions and what kind of relationships can you have with those people.
Mm-hmm.
So Hawaii is extraordinary because you can order coffee from someone today, they can roast it today, stick it in the mail, and you can have it in 3 days. And you can call them on the phone and say thank you and talk about it. Right. The level of relationship you can have with producers and businesses here in Hawaii about this thing which is grown in 80 odd countries is unheard of anywhere else in the world.
That's really cool. I had never thought of that.
Right? We're a community of people, and there's communities of people in Colombia and Rwanda and El Salvador, and like every coffee place has a community of people, and we have ours, and it's unique because it's in Hawaii and it's you have the United States and it's of this mix of people and it's got this history. All these things that make the place is what makes it special. And it's different. It's a different special than in some other producing area. But with ours, it's incredibly accessible. If you want to come visit, it's super easy to get on a plane to do that and drive on roads that are short distances apart and don't have potholes everywhere. And you can drink tap water and you can use the same money you were using yesterday. It's different but the same.
That is
It's
so true.
but the coffee bean itself, right? The same varieties we grow are grown elsewhere.
Hmm.
The same
Hmm.
processing that we do is done elsewhere.
Yeah.
I want to say to someone, yes, this romance is true that the place and the magic is magic to where that happens. And I just have never seen anything that supports that idea other than the desire for it to be true.
But it was interesting what you said, which was at one point there was such consistent production in just Kona that Kona coffee did taste like Kona coffee. But that's kind of no longer the case, is what you're saying, because there are so many different types of growers. Is that fair?
Yeah, well, let me expand on that so it's really clear. So if you go back 50 years ago in Kona, where again there was the only place growing coffee in Hawaii 50 years ago, you had a bunch of farmers, hundreds of farmers, who were mostly fruit farmers. They grew
Hmm.
coffee fruit and they sold the fruit to a mill. And the mill then turned that into green coffee. They took hundreds of coffees and mixed them all together, right? And there's only two, three, four, five mills, right? There weren't that many. So all of these coffees from all over the region were being mixed together. And so when you homogenize like that, it's all going to kind of taste the same. But now this new model where an individual farmer has an estate, they might have 1 acre, or 3 acres, or 10 acres, right? But they're going to sell you a bag of coffee that was grown on their property and is that coffee may have been manipulated by other people on other properties, right? Whether it was roasted somewhere else or processed somewhere else or dried somewhere else, right? That coffee was grown there and that farmer is selling you the coffee that they grew on their property. If place is really that important, definingly important, then every farm in Kona would have the same tasting coffee.
Right.
Now, each of these farmers has lots of decisions to make in terms of what variety to grow or how they want to process the coffee once it's picked or where in that tract of that region do they want to grow the coffee if they're a new farmer. And all of these little different pieces influence the flavor of the coffee. So now you can have two farmers right next door to each other, pretty similar environmental conditions, right? Producing very different flavored coffees because of all the things that the person does to influence it. And that to me is spectacular. And this is true everywhere in the world, right? It's not just in Hawaii, right? It's just easiest to see it here because it's such a small place and it's so easy to get different farm samples. I think this is really wonderful. I'm going to tell you a really amazing story because I think it's going to blow your mind. Around, right, when I first moved here in 2000, everybody in Kona grew the same variety. Everybody grew Typica. And that was just a historical quirk. That was a successful variety that came from Guatemala in 1892. Everybody started growing it because it produced more than the thing that was already here from Brazil. They had other varieties in the state. They had been brought in by the university just to have some, but nobody planted them.
Hmm.
And so around 2000, right, specialty coffee is taking off, becoming a thing. Some people are moving in here to start their farms and thinking, I want to do something different. There was a lot of conflict in Kona about this idea of people planting other varieties besides Typica. There were some pretty heated conversations about it, and there's some huge disagreements. And I remember talking to a farmer in these early days who was firmly believed that everybody should grow Typica. And I said, all right, so if your coffee tastes just like your neighbor's coffee, why should I buy your coffee? Because you're in a state farm, just the way they're in a state farm. You're telling me every coffee is the same, right? He's like, yeah, I have better packaging, so you'll buy my coffee. And this idea that there was so much pride and importance about his coffee that had nothing to do with his coffee.
Right.
We are since now, that was 20 odd years ago. We're far from that. There are lots of varieties planted. Now we have different species being planted because we have pests we have to contend with. So we're introducing varieties that have, Robusta, conifera genes in them, and it's a whole different place. And now, right, individual differences are celebrated. We have competitions to celebrate those differences. We're
I was
seeking
going
those.
to ask what drove that change, and it sounds like a lot on the grower side. Pest pressure, that's definitely a Hawaiian thing. I've been to Hawaii. Pest pressure is real.
It's real. I don't think that's what drove it initially. It's driving it now. It's partly driving that, but we already are accepting, right? I think there were, right? We're in America, right? You get to do what you do on your property, right? That's just an American right, right? I think there were some individuals who came and wanted to do it differently, and they said, "You can't stop me. I'm going to do it." And then there's this quirk with how the quality competitions work in that they sort of celebrated flavors that weren't here already. So the new farmers who were introducing new flavors because of the new varieties were winning these competitions. And when you win competitions, you sell more coffee. So the marketplace sort of started pushing people to relax their old ideas. Um, and then with pest pressures added on top of that, oh yeah, that's anything's fair game now.
So it was keeping up with the Joneses, and then a pest wave, and next thing you know, Typica's out.
Yeah, I mean it's still the most common variety, but there are lots of other good things happening.
Sure, there's a lot of other ones. That is very fascinating, and I love to see the evolution of the gene pool as the market dictates and as things change and shift. You know what I mean? There's always the new kind, and so that's what I
Yes,
love to talk about.
you just said something that is really actually quite profound. Whereas the marketplace is dictating it, and Hawaii is an unusual marketplace because
Mhm,
our coffee is bloody expensive, right? It's just way more expensive than most coffees on the planet.
mhm,
So the market is either going to buy our coffee because of the reputation, independent of the quality,
mhm.
or they're going to buy it because uh, the price is commensurate with the quality.
Right.
And so there's definitely been a strong segment of our industry which is catering to the market that will spend more money on quality.
Yeah.
That's been a real thing. It's been fascinating to watch.
There's a lot of customers who are ready for that. I'm telling you that right now, who are ready to treat coffee as more than just the thing that the bank pours you for free. There's a
Yeah.
lot of people who are willing to take the relationship deeper, and that's exactly why we do episodes like this, Shawn. So there's something there I want to drill down on, though, which is you mentioned Kona being blended together a lot of time in the past, and the word Kona is often followed by the word blend. And
Mhm.
sometimes that means that they're blending Kona coffee with other Kona coffee. And sometimes it means that they can include non Kona coffee in the blend, is my understanding. I even saw some controversy some time ago now. It wasn't too recently, but they were arguing over what percentage constitutes to be able to put the word Kona on the bag. And I know that's very important stuff when it comes to what you just said, which is the consumer interpretation of the origin. Can you talk about Kona blends and how changing that percentage can kind of alter things?
How many hours do we have to talk about this? Um, for most of our coffee's history, our the price that Hawaii could earn with coffee was the same as everybody else in the world. In the 1970s, somehow Kona was able to dissociate from that global price, and the prices of Kona coffee started climbing up. I remember the price of green Kona coffee when I was writing my dissertation was like $8 a pound, $10 a pound, versus the world price, which was dollar, whatever. Now Kona prices are something like $30 or $40 a green pound. I mean, huge difference from today's $3 a green pound. So what happened was that Kona had this reputation that people really wanted it, but apparently, or someone was clever enough to think, oh, well, maybe they can't afford all of that because they're expensive for those people. What if we make a blend where we have some Kona in there, but we want them to know there's Kona in there, so they're satisfying whatever need they have for it. So let's do that. We'll put the word Kona blend on there. Totally makes sense in a perfect world where people are honest and clear, transparent.
Have
But that's not the
pride
case.
and integrity and all those
All
things.
those things, because some people realized, well, There's no way to enforce that or prove that.
Sure.
I can put whatever I want on the bag and put something else in the bag. And in the 90s, there was a big kerfuffle where there was a company, shipping coffee to the mainland from grown in Kona, um, dumping it out. Or maybe they didn't even always do that, right? Maybe they just had the burlap sack. So they would just buy coffee from Central and South America and put that coffee in the burlap sacks, say Kona, and ship that out
Wow.
to roasters.
Yeah.
It was a big deal when it finally came to light. But it did spur a bunch of legal changes where one of those changes was, yes, you can blend Kona coffee. And the rule is, if you blend it, you have to state how much of that bag of coffee is in fact Kona. And the
Hmm.
minimum amount of content you have to have in there is 10%. You can have 12% or 18 or 97, doesn't matter, but you have to state it. But it has to be at least 10. And so this 10% blend became the standard blend number, because why would you do 12% when you could do 10, right? You're going to save
Feels a
money.
little low. Just for my gut instinct as a human, feels a little low.
So some people thought, great, we have a rule. And some people thought, this is low. This is maybe legal, but not moral, right? And doesn't do justice to the industry. So this is a conflict that actually split farmer groups.
Yeah.
Yeah. One farmer group says we have to change that. It should be 100%, right? We should not be diluting. Yeah, so there's
Yeah.
this big sort of ethical conversation about, well, should we have blends? And if we do have blends, what's permissible and what should the bag say? And what ended up happening is that a couple of companies, sort of the only ones who did that, and they're the companies that needed to sell cheaper coffee. So coffees that went to grocery stores or drugstores, um, hotels, right? People who are price conscious but wanted to have some Hawaiian coffee in there. Right? So there's this whole industry of these 10% blends. And as it turns out, um, those blends are moving a significant amount of our Kona coffee.
Yeah.
So it's an important conversation on many levels, because changing that number may very well send ripples through the
Yeah.
production industry, because as prices go up, consumers might change their mind about what they can buy. So for many years, there have been efforts in the legislature to change that value from 10% to something else. And 2 years ago, there was finally enough people, both in the industry and in the legislature, decided, okay, now we're going to do it.
Mhm.
And those rules have not taken effect. They take effect next July, 2027.
Of course,
Well,
the
you needed
wheels of
some time.
justice turn slowly.
Well, yes, but it's practical, right? So if you're a large company and you
Yeah.
buy 100,000 labels, right? And then the
Yes.
rule changes on you tomorrow, like you just have all this wasted money, right?
All the
So
bags,
there's
all
a
the ads, all that stuff.
right. So there's a practical component to it. And the rule has been changed from 10% minimum to 51% minimum. So starting next July, any blended Hawaiian coffee in the state has to be at least 51%. Now, as it turns out, as we speak, there's some federal rules that are starting to match this. And those haven't been ironed out, but it looks like what's going to happen is that even on the mainland, people who are selling Kona blends will also have to abide by 51% blend law. And it's so young that I can't tell you any details, that even the feds can't tell you the details yet. That's how young it is, but
Oh,
it's
that's
in
interesting.
motion.
I like protecting that, though. That's important.
Yeah, ethically, I'm 100% behind it.
At least we have a
Absolutely.
number. As long as we can agree on a number and then it's transparent and people know what that number is, and
Well,
it's got to be higher than 10. 10 is a
right.
little
So,
absurd.
so 51 makes sense, right? Most of the bag now is from this place.
Yeah,
And that's great.
that is good.
When this was happening in the legislature, and I testified against this change, actually, and I'm happy to talk about it, but it might be more than we need to right now.
Yeah.
I said, well, if you're going to change it, go to 100, right? If the idea is that you're worried about protecting the name, then commit to it, right? The the thing that I'm arguing against with you guys, 100%, 51%, it's the same problem, right? The people who are going to buy it are going to buy it anyways, whether it's 51 or 100, right? The issue is about price and what's going to happen to our industry because of that price shift and the change in consumer demand. And that's going to send ripples that we're not ready for and we're not preparing for, and that's going to hurt us. And so
Hmm.
I advocated against it, but I'm just one
Wow.
lone voice. So we're going to see this change to 51%, and which means all of these large companies that sell 10% blends have to switch to 51%. Well, if they're going to continue it, they have to switch to at least that. And they have to hope that all the consumers who are currently buying their 10% blends are now going to adapt to 51%, because that price increase is significant. So we don't really know what's going to happen. It's a more ethical position. I think it might have some knock on effects that are going to hurt.
Always. Always. Isn't that always how it goes?
And maybe it's a Band-Aid, right? Rip it off and just be done with it, and then the dust will settle. And hopefully the dust, when it settles, doesn't too many people don't get hurt. Maybe I'm totally wrong, right?
Mhm.
Maybe I'm just uh, worrying too much, and it's all gonna be fine.
I want to revisit one thing you said there, which is you can't prove what beans you put in the bag. So why don't you just swap the bags if you don't have any scruples and you want to make a bunch of money?
Yeah.
But there's also another side of your work that plays into that, which is some of your research and some of your work has been in the field of biochemically tracing the origins of beans. And if I remember correctly, you said green beans and even possibly roasted beans, which I do not understand that. That is fascinating. Tell me about that work. How can you use a lab to determine where a bean came from?
So I'm gonna, let you down not gently at all. As far as I know, we can't do that yet.
Oh,
Let me rephrase that. I'm not convinced we can do that yet.
okay.
First, there's two conversations, right? There's the green side and there's the roasted side. Because roasting does all kinds of things to coffee, and things you can use for green as markers don't work for roasted. But ultimately, what you want to know is you want to be able to go to a grocery store, some roastery, anywhere on the planet, and pick up a bag of roasted coffee and determine where it's from
Mhm.
without the paper trail, right? Paper can be hard to trace and it can be manipulated and it can go on for a long time before. So, in all the cases in Hawaii where people have been bad actors have been, you know, been found guilty because of paper trails. But really, it would be so much better if you could just give it to a lab and say, "Hey, could you test for this coffee and tell me where it's from?" The scientific literature and some of my work, right? I've done some of this work myself, right? Is filled with ideas on how to tell coffees apart. Well, you can tell coffees apart, right? Different species, super easy biochemistry. That's super easy. Um, but where it's from, right? You can't ask it. There's no fingerprint per se, so we have to create the fingerprint, right? What chemicals are stable and unique to a place, right? It can't be chlorogenic acids, right? Too complex and too variable. It can't be strontium because there's strontium everywhere. Is it 10 different things or is it 20 different things that happen in patterns? And you can sort of do that. You can say if you add enough different markers, you can get a pretty good picture. Get enough things in a small enough sample set, you can create beautiful maps, if you will. So one problem is if you're going to be able to tell where coffee's from, you want to have a database, right? You want to build your model, your chemical fingerprint based on all the coffees in the world, right? You can't say I'm going to collect, 100 samples from Colombia, 100 from Kenya, 100 from Hawaii, and 100 from Costa Rica, and
That's
then
it.
create fingerprints and say, okay, now I can tell you where the coffees are from. You might be able to tell where those 4 coffees are from, right? You might be able to pin them to one of those 4 places, not the rest of the world. So to really make the system work globally, right, you need many samples from across all countries and across all the things that might influence that fingerprint. So just to create sort of a system that truly works globally requires thousands and thousands of samples. So it's is it scientifically doable? Yeah. Is it economically viable and sensible? Hard to say. So when I was doing my work, we were just trying to do it within Hawaii. Can I tell you where in Hawaii these coffees come from? I had a very small sample set, and the data looked beautiful. And I could tell you I could tell you if it was organic or not. I could tell you what island it was from. I could tell you a few other things based on the set of markers and the techniques I was using. Right, and there's lots of markers and techniques, so like there's nothing special about mine in the grand scheme of things. My research suffered from the problem of what we just described. Right, if you pick 100 samples from 4 countries, you can say a lot about those things. It's so specific. Right. In Hawaii, there's not many farms. And on some islands, there's only one farm. So it was a small database. So it was easy to make the math fit a small data set. It's hard to make the math fit a large data set. So my work could have led to where in Hawaii this coffee came from. The easiest work is in the green level because the coffee is least changed. The problem is roasting happens and consumers get roasting, right? You want to be able to say to someone, oh, that company is selling this blend on the grocery store shelf. They're saying it's this, but I don't think it is.
Mhm.
That's what you want to be able to prove. So you need something that, um, your fingerprint has to be based on something that's not affected by roasting. And I think the problem is now nobody has proved that their method is roast proof. And even just last week, I was thinking about some other complications of dealing with this. So the most promising system, or one of the most promising systems, use ratios of compounds, usually isotopes, usually stable isotopes, and more than one. So it might be, 5, 6, 7 different isotopes that, a ratio that you might see a compound, whether it's a chemical or a single atom or whatever, shifting across a roast level. But the hypothesis is that two things will change, but they'll change in a similar pattern. So their ratio will be consistent across roast levels.
Mhm.
This is a very sound argument. And as it turns out, there's a big lawsuit a couple of years ago. Some Kona farmers sued a bunch of humongous companies on the mainland and locally, saying, hey, we can prove that your coffees that you say are, Kona blends are not in fact Kona blends. We have this new data. And I was working on that for one of the defense groups, and stumbled upon some research which put that hypothesis into question. It says, oh, maybe roasting doesn't happen with all the changes that happen aren't linear, so that ratios of these isotopes shift in a weird way, so that you might get different values for a light roast from a dark roast, which is not intuitive. But there's some data that suggests that's true.
God, my
So
goodness. That complicates things.
it complicates things a lot. There's like a strontium zinc or like a strontium something to a strontium something else. Like I'd have to go look at the literature to look into this.
Elemental differences.
Yeah, because of the soil and the things that plants take up is a little
Yeah.
more consistent. Like there's really good data across many crops that show that, where your thing is grown, there are certain isotopes that are more present or not, that will get taken up or not.
Oh my goodness. So
Um,
we're closer than you said at the beginning of this where we can't do this, but we're kind of closer than
we're
one
in the
might
right
think.
direction, right? So the things that you have to do though, so if you're doing isotopes, it's a little easier. This particular lawsuit that I was participating in also did just atoms, right? So it's like zinc, for example, I think was one of them. Or something is a ratio to zinc. I don't remember the details.
Sure.
Something like that. But I remember zinc because one of the things that you might fertilize with occasionally is zinc.
Mhm.
So the other thing that people haven't really looked at is, are we adding things as fertilizer, which might influence what the plant is taking up and therefore influencing these values, right? So maybe you're not seeing that mountainside in Guatemala is producing that fingerprint, but the farmers who are fertilizing with that thing are influencing the fingerprint.
Adding extra zinc that's
Right.
uptakeable, bioavailable, and now changing those ratios. Okay.
Right. So if you were randomly selecting coffees off the shelf, right, maybe you're actually seeing farmers who were organic farmers or were not, and they were adding extra zinc, whatever it is, right? It's I think we have lots of ideas for what good fingerprints will be. We need someone to prove that, hey, these things that we're looking at aren't changing because of these other things. And then I'd be very convinced. But I'm just not convinced yet.
That would make the Kona argument a lot easier if we could get there.
Right. And then that roaster in Maine who is being honest or not honest, right? Some customer could take the coffee and say, okay, you have bought this much Kona coffee. Now look at your books and see how you blended it, right? You could go through that process, but I bet you could fudge that, especially if after people were suspicious, right? But if you could just take it and ship it to a lab, bam, right? That's what we're after. And part of the problem is I don't think there's that much origin fraud in the world
Right.
to justify a global model. And I don't know that it happens enough and at its a scale, two things, right? Often enough and at a large enough scale to really impact Hawaii negatively. Bad actors happen. There was someone else who was caught a year or two ago doing naughty things. This does happen, right? Maybe it happens every 20 years, or maybe it happens, there were these blends on the mainland, right? This lawsuit, there were companies that said, yep, we are guilty. We did that thing. We're going to settle with you. Some said that. Yeah, they're bad actors. Is it really, is the negative impact enough to justify the cost and effort to create the measurement system? Now, there's a company in New Zealand called Ortane whose sole existence is to create systems of fingerprinting crops. And they've done some really excellent work with a handful of crops. And they're working on coffee too. Um, And so maybe, right, it's more as they slowly build the database, global database, right? As long as your goal is not, hey, let's do this all today. It's,
Hmm.
let's take 5 or 10 years to do this. Like maybe then, right, there's a viable economical system way of doing it.
Yeah, there's the practical application, but then there's also just I'm interested in the learning side. What are we going to learn from this sort of
I want
thing?
to be able to do
That's
it because it would be cool,
right,
right?
exactly. That's what we hope for, as a podcaster and a researcher. Um, but back to the Hawaiian farming culture. When we went to Hawaii and met some of the coffee farmers, we met a few small organic permaculture regenerative type coffee farmers in Hawaii, and it was so beautiful to see, Sean. Like it was really touching the way the culture blends with the practices, the way they talk about the aina, the land, and caring for it, and aloha and farming with aloha. And it's just like it's almost making me choke up right now. It's so unique, it's so profound. But I know it's also not all like that with coffee production in Hawaii. So can you speak to the farmers and the kind of regenerative side of this and the struggles those farmers might face?
Yes. Um, so let's take a somewhat bigger view first. Let's go back to this idea that, for the sake of our conversation, let's say there's 1,000 farms growing coffee in Hawaii right now.
Okay.
It's probably pretty close to that. And we don't have the exact number, but I think most people will agree that it's a reasonable guess. So, of those, how many of those farms are doing something that we might say is organic or regenerative or permaculture, or something along those super tree
Yeah.
hugger environmentally focused lines? I really hate to say this, but I think that number is depressingly low.
Yeah.
If it were more than, if someone said 50, I'd be surprised. If someone said 30, I'd be like, huh, all right, show me. If it were more like 10 or 15, I'd be like, yeah, that seems reasonable. And the
Wow.
reason I say that, um, there are farmers who see farming as a unification with the land, right? Where they're trying to create something in a diverse ecosystem that is healthy for them and the system, and it's complex and takes a lot of energy and it's well thought out. Right? Those exist, but that's
Mm.
really hard.
Yeah.
And it tends to be farms who are not just coffee farms, but grow a lot of different things and have lots of different marketplaces for all sorts of things, right? And that's part of the beauty of the system, right? Is the
True.
complexity. So I think it's not the default. It wasn't the default consideration because nobody does it, right? So your neighbor's not doing it. Why should you do it? I think there's a lot of that. But there's also, it's just really hard to do it profitably. And from the most basic definition of that, when coffee leaf rust came to Hawaii, it was devastating, and it can be devastating. And you can, like all things, once you get through the devastation, you learn to manage it, right? You can manage it, and whether that's with um, complex, diverse systems, or whether that's with agrochemicals, synthetic agrochemicals. Like there's lots of ways of doing it. But I know at, at least one farmer, organic coffee farmer, said to me, "Yeah, we're going to give up organic certification because we just can't control the fungus in a way that's economical, because costs of production in Hawaii are already incredibly high. We have very expensive coffee. One of those reasons is that our cost of production is incredibly high, right? Not using synthetic agrochemicals in your farming system is already more expensive than using them. So to then do it and have this incredible challenge thrust upon you by, the wind, um,
Yeah.
it made it unviable from an economic perspective. So that fairly large operations transitioned away from being organic, and I suspect others have too. But we never had very many to start with. There was a local research study here trying to identify organic farmers years. This is, I don't know, 5, 10 years, maybe 10 years ago, 15 years ago, and they could only find they're looking for shade grown coffee. And if you're going to grow coffee organically anywhere, particularly in Hawaii, you want to have shade trees, and they could only find like 20, 15 or 20 shade
Right.
farms in Kona. There's not that many of them. Because it's a
Wow.
whole different level of farming and thinking, and there's a lot of benefits, but there's a lot of challenge. And unless you have, so to circle back to where you started, unless you have a farmer who has a relationship with the farm and the
Mhm.
vision and the end goal, right? You're just not going to find them here. And they do exist. And those farms are amazing. They're beautiful and wholesome. And the sense of place, or the sense of connection to place, is evident. And those are really neat places to be at, but they're just so hard. And this is not unique to Hawaii, right? They're hard everywhere, and they're somewhat unique everywhere. And I'm glad people are telling those stories
Yeah.
and finding those coffees. But what sort of breaks my heart, I don't know if you can, if sort of the comes out of my tone overall, is that we live in an unusual coffee growing area where we have access to all the information about coffee you could ever hope to find, right? We have the internet, we have experts at the university, we have consultants, we have all kinds of people. Like the way we can find the ways to do it. And all the places in the world, we have the people who are farming have way more resources to do it. Now, they don't because of the effort and the sense of profitability, right? Maybe you can create this extraordinary, you know, diverse, integrated coffee farm that will take time and energy and resources to economically recoup those costs or to make a profit in the long term. Might be a really long term, right? Conversion alone takes several years. So, from a business sense and a time energy sense, especially if you're older, right? You've come to semi-retire, retire here, like farming's hard. Like to say to yourself, I'm going to make it way harder, but doing this really great thing. That's a hard
because it
sell.
might pay off for the next generation. It's playing on hard mode, and growing anything in Hawaii is playing on hard mode. To be
Yeah,
honest,
which
there's
is
a lot of pressure out there.
that's the
So that
reality, right?
is the reality of the situation. So that's a very reasonable yet compassionate take, and also kind of putting it out there where like, yeah, we can do better. We can arm ourselves with knowledge. We know more about coffee leaf rust now than we ever have before. So I think that's a really good take. It's a really even-handed take, Sean.
The hardest part is that success and success slash function is determined by dollars, right?
Mhm.
I need to be able to, feed my family. And these models make that hard to see.
Yeah.
Supporting farmers that see the world and their farm in a more complex way. The definition is not dollars because everybody has to spend more dollars for it to happen, right? It means a farmer has to spend more dollars and more resources, and but the consumer, because of that, right? The consumer then has to spend more money to support that,
Mhm.
and that's a hard sell in a society that says everything should be as cheap as possible. You can find cheap coffee that tastes delicious without any connection to how it was produced or how it interacted with the environment. So if this is something a person cares about and they want to see more of and they want to
Mhm.
support, then you have to support it. And that might mean paying more and maybe less, right? That's not your everyday coffee. That's a once every 2 months coffee, right?
Mhm.
Some small support. We can't ever dissociate, right, the the moral ethical position of what we want to do with how we can physically do that. You have to accept that your money is being used in a good way and you get a less physical unit of whatever,
Mhm.
right? Whether that's I want to use less single-use plastic in my life, and that shifts how I spend money on things that substitutes for that, or the foods that I buy. Doing the right thing for the planet at large sometimes means making sacrifices personally, whether in time or energy or money. And if you really believe in that, then those sacrifices aren't so hard to make. They're not great, right? Nobody wants to make sacrifices. So it's your own ethical decision and your own, scenario, right? I don't want to say everybody has more money to spend on things that are more expensive.
Sure.
Um,
But it is a vote in a way.
yeah, absolutely. And it might be changing how you spend your resources. There's a bigger cost than the dollars. That's what it comes down to, right? So
Yeah, that's right. And also, yes, and I'll piggyback on that by saying we say this all the time, Sean. Consumers have historically based their purchasing of coffee on two things: price and taste. And now we're moving beyond that. A lot of people are moving beyond that. And that's why it's important to have people like you on a podcast like this, because people are hungry for more than just price and taste. And honestly, it all goes together in hand. When you get coffee that was grown in a way that you're describing, you really can taste it and you really can feel the difference in your body going from something that's really, really low quality. So that's what I'll say there is that distinction is so important, to move away from just cost and taste and to think about the environment and to think about the health and to think about the farmer and to think about all these other things.
yeah, I think that's really important. And the more we do that, the more it will happen. Then it becomes the norm, right? Every waterfall starts with a single drop, sort of mentality.
Well said, my friend. Listen, this was another amazing episode. Time flies by when you're the guest, but let's make sure to make time for plugs. Where can people find you? Where can people find your work, your books? Tell us about it.
I am very easy to find because of this magical internet that we have. I have two companies, Cafe Consulting and Grok Coffee. You can learn about them and me through those websites. I am the author or co-author of 3 books: the Hawaii Coffee Book, Coffee Comprehensive Guide to the Bean, the Beverage, and the Industry, and the Little Coffee Know-It-All. Unfortunately, the latter is out of print, so you have to get used copies or digital versions of it. And the other 2 are still active in print and are still full of wide array of information about coffee, some of which I've written, some of which I've been editing. I'm a co-editor of. Um, but I have a telephone. You can call me. You can email me. I'm super. I'm just a normal guy who loves coffee.
I love having you on the show, Shawn. So thank you so much for taking the time today. Our listeners really appreciate it. I really appreciate it. Great job today
I've
on the
been
show.
honored. It's been so much fun. Thanks for asking such great questions that I want to talk about.
We'll be back with Shawn, listener. I know you love this episode, so hit subscribe. Stay tuned. We got a lot more coming at you. Don't blink, everybody. That's it for today, though. This is Jordan River and Dr. Shawn Steiman. We're signing off. We're wishing you an extraordinary rest of your day, and we'll see you next time on the Health First Coffee Podcast. Bye-bye.